Welcome to the Grid Mod Pod, brought to you by AEIC. In this podcast, you'll hear from the utility industry's top operations leaders on how their companies are working to modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thanks for joining us.
When you were growing up, how much did you actually learn about electrical safety? And what if a few simple lessons could prevent injuries or save a life? Find out on today's episode of the Grid Mod Pod. Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Cook, the Vice President of Technical Strategy at AEIC and host of the Grid Mod Pod. Today, I'm joined by Geoffrey Greene from Orange and Rockland Utilities to talk about how utilities and communities can close the gap on electrical safety awareness, starting young and making the message stick. This matters because safety is not just a utility program, it's a shared responsibility, and education is one of the most practical forms of prevention. In this episode, you'll learn why safety education needs to start early and stay consistent, how partnerships with schools and emergency management strengthen impact, and why interactive, engaging teaching improves retention and real-world behavior. So before we get started, introduce yourself and we'll jump in.
Sure. My name's Geoff Greene, and I work for Orange and Rockland, which is owned by Con Edison. Serve New York City, Con Edison, and Orange and Rockland serves Rockland, Orange County, parts of northern New Jersey, and a little bit of Sullivan County. And that's like the southern part of New York State there. It's upstate if you're in the city, but it's the southern part of New York State if you're in upstate New York.
So, I know the project in itself, so I just kind of wanted to, where do you sit within the organization and kind of like, how did this problem come to be? And, you're the ultimate, one of the champions probably of the effort, but just kind of, start there, on kind of explaining, where we are.
Absolutely. So at the time, I was in the emergency preparedness department. So anything with any type of emergency, we were in. So storms, earthquakes, floods, plagues, whatever was happening, we were involved with. And that's really where this training came from, because it's something we did as a group. Was we would meet twice a year and at request with first responders, so firefighters, police officers, EMS, and we have a lot of volunteer firefighters. So we would go and teach them about electrical safety. And the team together, we talked about, it's great we're hitting first responders, we're doing that. They know the hazards of electricity. What about everybody else? What about the customers? What about their families, everyone else involved? And over time, when you walk outside your home, you see power lines, and we have our entire lives. You're combating something that is so commonplace. And we always talk about the utility industry as you got to look out for complacency. I have it too. When I walk out my door and I see power lines overhead, I'm like, that's there every day. But even though it's there every day, there's a real hazard there. And we do a good job of informing the public during events what to do with downed wires. And we have press releases and we have all these wonderful events. But what about young kids? Like, do the schools teach this? Are parents teaching this at home? They may be, they may not be. And just how can we help? And as it turns out, there are emergency preparedness clubs in high schools, which I was not there when I was in high school.
Yeah,
so,
I want one.
So that was a perfect opportunity to break into this. And our really good working relationship with our offices of emergency management in the counties helped us break in and do these trainings to these clubs. And I do see it expanding from there. And the other thing we had with this was it improved our working relationship with that Orange Office of Emergency Management, the OEMs, just for short. So that relationship grows. We grow a relationship with the community by doing this. And the way you approach a training with a first responder who's a firefighter, has a career, may work in an electrician or something, whereas a student may not have that base knowledge. So you have to adjust how you
Right,
teach.
they're like babies.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's your, most people are just, I hit the light switch and it turns on, and that's fine, but when you're talking about safety, it's not. You have to know how to deal with it and some of the more detailed understanding of it. The other thing I used is, so my wife's a teacher, and she taught me that everybody learns differently. So some people can see something, some people can hear something, some need to write it down. So you have to make sure that you use all those skills to get everybody, make sure they have that understanding. And when you teach somebody when they're young, they're more apt to learn and know that forever. And when it comes to electrical safety, that's what this company's about, that's what I'm about, and that's what everyone who works here about. It's the forefront of everything we do. And now it's also going into the schools and teaching these kids about it.
Okay, I'm gonna dig in a little bit really for selfish reasons because, this is kismet, and I think it's another broader brush lesson in life, especially, I have 6 children and, across the grades. And so one of my passions is truly bringing education of the electrical power grid to the masses because working in the utility, I was fascinated with even those that were inside the utility fundamentally didn't understand the complexity, the physicality, and really how it works. And if you don't understand how it works, you truly can't connect to the dangers that exist if you're around them, especially with the field crews. So like the whole phenomena of like what is induced voltage or induced current, what is stray voltage, like why does electricity flow? So like that has been a passion of mine for the last 20 years. And just in the last 2 years, there is this gap, and you are talking right to it, is like, when do we introduce these concepts into the curriculum to the children? Because they ultimately become our neighbors, our community members, and our emergency response teams. So it's like the full bake. And so I'm going to ask you, just thinking about the journey is like, so the problem, ultimately from a problem statement, was just realizing the amount of groups and or entities that really need to understand the phenomena. Let's just to summarize, just to bring it up. And so you went to really engage with the emergency response group. So you called them the OEM, which was of your communities or like one particular one? Like you had to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, so the Office of Emergency Management, that's actually who we do those trainings for the first responders through.
Through. Okay.
They're a government entity.
Government entity.
And they are already interacting with these clubs in the high school. They're like
So they already have the connections.
Yeah, so that got us in the door, and we work really well with the OEM. We have a great relationship with them, and they essentially they kind of were the driving force, and that partnership drove it. Is that, hey, Jeff, would you come do your presentation that we do with the first responders for this club? And we've done it several times now. It was really well received. I actually think they did it personally twice. I'm hoping we do more in the future. And that was really the what got us in. We weren't sure how to, because we always talked about like how do we go to the schools? Like, do we start elementary? Same issue. Do we start elementary? Do we go to the high schools and say, hey, can we give a safety presentation? And the OEM helped us get that foot in the door, essentially.
So just to those listening, turning like, well, how does this matter to me? Is like one person can make a difference with one strong idea that they're passionate about. And then creating the right connections at the right time is also incredibly valuable and shouldn't be overlooked. And so thinking about the program or, kind of the uplift or kind of the doing, I guess, the executing. So I think a big part of 2026 for me is bridging the gap between strategy and execution. Like we're done talking about it. And by the way, we can just find the information because it's all available to us. But the human connectedness to like actually do the work is where the true value of like us right now talking. So being selfish, like what was that, like, okay, it's there, you see it, and you're like, okay, I got a connection with OEM. So like, what does the actual like development of the training look like? The number of resources, like you said, you utilize your wife who is a teacher. Like, what kind of mechanics and connections really allowed you to create the training to step into the door and just start doing?
We used the training we already had for first responders and just made some modifications, simplified a little bit so it's a little easier to understand,
Okay.
less technical terms, more like
You already had it. The
Yeah.
foundation.
Yeah, so we just kind of built on that and made it a little more accessible, and it wasn't overly complicated to do because it was kind of simplified already, but we focused a little bit more on where the power comes from. So like the whole system as a whole, because like you said, folks may walk outside and see the power line of their house and not understand how all that works. So we did a little bit on there, and it was a lot on what you might see in a day. So it rains, the wind, you may see a line down. How do you respond to that? What's your recourse? What's your safety? How far away should you be? And then even I used one of the big things that can happen is a wire on a car. Some of the kids in the high school are driving. So what do you do in that situation? I asked them, and a lot of them said, "Will you get out of the car?" Some said, "Stay in the car." So, and then you get into induced voltage and stuff, talk about step potential. Okay, so the car's on fire. Now you have to get out of the car. Now what? Well, you got to do the shuffle. Every day I'm shuffling type thing.
Yeah.
You got to shuffle. But that's stuff that you might not inherently know. So my hope is that we tell these kids, they go talk about it with their parents. Now we're having conversations in the home. Now we're doing stuff. And you can't just show them and talk to them about it. So what I used to do is I used to, and I'm not a very athletic person, but I can move around a little bit. I'd get a chair and I'd sit down and I'd like kind of show them how to jump out of the car. And then I'd show them the techniques. And while it's a little corny and a little funny, it gets
It connects.
exactly. They're laughing, but now they remember, oh, I remember that the big guy over there, he was showing us how to walk across to shuffle across the pavement and make sure that I'm the right distance away, the 60 or 80 feet based on whether it's wet. So now I remember, by just, and that's stuff I learned from just interacting with teachers and stuff like that.
So I have 3 drivers, and my first driver, I forget how I came to be, but I didn't do driver's ed. My parents didn't give this to me, but for some reason I had a moment where I met someone who said, "You gotta meet Jimmy." And I was like, "Okay." And so a local neighborhood up the street, I look it up on the internet, I do an introduction, and he took my daughter through it. And now my third child, my son, and I'll just say we're in the car. He goes, "Jimmy wouldn't do that." And I think, and he was so engaging, like you just said, like, a little bit corny, a little bit outspoken. And that's another thing I think about the training and the curriculum, because the utility space is very awesome. Very, very serious, very, because it's very serious. But
Engineering, analytical, I need the diagrams.
right,
Yeah,
it's
site
very
plans.
complex.
I
You
need
don't
yeah.
understand it, but really, it is incredibly important to break it down, create the human connection, tie, the basic fundamentals of safety need to be taught, right? Because, and I just think now that we're talking about, isn't it fascinating that we don't educate our children all the way? I mean, the only thing we don't teach them is don't put the fork into the outlet. No, but like,
I never remember hearing anyone in my school experience tell me, "Don't go touch it down wire." I mean, I knew not to, maybe from my parents. I don't know.
right,
I don't have
where did
that where I learned it, but I don't physically remember it. And that is the goal, is now you will remember. And it's still very new, and I'm hoping it continues even though I've moved on, and I probably will make sure it does. I don't physically remember in my memory when that happened. I know it did, but I'm hoping that this next generation, they will remember. They'll remember Geoff Greene with the crazy voice came in
right, tell me
and
about
taught
the
us about
down wire.
wires and jumped around the classroom. Yeah.
And even just like bottling up, so like you said, like there's a transition period, there's a succession, there's a scalability of the program. So like thinking, within a utility, like you said you moved out of that position. So, like, I guess, remind me, you worked because there is emergency response teams in every utility for us listeners that don't work for utility. There's actually many groups that we don't talk about enough, and they all have to be at the table from some really key decision making, which, just explains kind of the complexity in itself, just organizational structure. But so your proposal, was it a program, or was it volunteer based, then it became something larger, and then it was adopted as
Yeah, it was volunteer based. It was
okay,
kind of me. I was the driving force with support from my team
right,
and the manager, because we had done another school before I did this one, and we were kind of getting it going and really trying to break in. And this last time was how we kind of broke into the schools. I was kind of the driving force behind it, but it was a team effort. We all have a role in emergency response, regardless of what you're doing for the company. Anything you do, you're in emergency response in
exactly.
some facet. Yeah. And a dedication to the community. And that is huge for us. Like, the safety of a public and employees is number one, and this puts us right in front of it. And we do a ton of outreach for the community. We have great event contractor forums. electric car test drives, all sorts of things. And that safety message is always at the front, and including with this. And this really just drives this home. But I can see this becoming a program one day. We're doing stuff with drones. I've done career days. And again, that like kind of just gets your the foot in the door to talk about safety with everybody.
So thinking about like lessons like from, so it was volunteer based, there was a personal passion. What lessons, and I think if we talked to every utility, they would have some form of this. But I think
Mhm.
what really I latched on to was, that early education and that central focus on, engagement with the public, but like teaching the safety part. So I wanted to hear more about it. Okay, shout out to the utilities. Like it is a core function. Like you walk in utilities, safety first, right? And there's a reality to it, and so they understand it. They're educating, but that bridging the gap to the public safety, and then really that early education bit. Because like you had the OEM group, which was a governing body that had the contacts with the schools, but thinking about like scalability, like packaging the program to then really share or just acknowledge. And so it's really not like a product per se, but it's an essence that you really want to embody with other organizations. So I guess, like thinking about how to scale it or maybe just share the contribution or, create what is some of the lessons you learned kind of championing it through.
I think if I had to do this without, like, say I didn't have the OEM, I may have just, like I said, my wife's a teacher. I could have gone through her. Use any networking you can to meet somebody who does it. And if you're active in the community, which the utilities generally are, I know we are, that is an opportunity to do that. Don't be afraid to go through your customer service team, go through your teams that would have that outreach with them and have that communication like, hey, we're really passionate about safety. We want to do a presentation for your children. And that's it. You do one, maybe you do it annually. Maybe then you do smaller groups, and see how it can grow. And one thing I learned about dealing with the kids and stuff is be straight up and honest with them, total respect for everybody, and there's no bad questions. Like you're gonna get some what may be quote silly questions. They're not silly at all. Any question they have is worth your time to answer it. And that's really the big thing because when you're coming from a tech, like say you have someone who's been doing this for 30 years teaching this class, they have such a technical expertise that a simple question might be like, well, I don't know what that wire is that's bringing they might not know what a wire is. Take that question with all seriousness as you would any other question. That's really the best advice I can give. The only bad question is the one not asked. And that's
Right.
something that I really champion. Always, every question's important. It's really, you just got to put yourself out there and be willing to be a little corny and make some bad jokes.
And I do think there's like a lot. I mean, there's a lot to unpack because I think just in general, we as individuals, especially working within a large entity, and there's high risk and, stakes, but that whole engagement with your community. I mean, I was just listening to another podcast where they were talking about, we're in the age of abundance, right? We have more downtime than we ever had in human civilization, which means that, we have spare time. And what does that look like? And we're spending a lot of it, sadly, on devices or like not interacting with their communities. And so like it is a volunteer. What I'm hearing from this message is it really spurred from this volunteers moment. And I guess this triggers something in me. I remember during COVID in 2020, you felt very isolated. So I actually reached out to one of my friends who was a guidance counselor of a local school district. I pitched my idea that I wanted to teach engineering power systems to, the STEM realm because of, that. And I actually, now that I think about it, maybe I'm going to jump back in, but I did get in contact with 5 schools, and really it did just start with this genuine connection of like, I think we should, so we all could be teachers and connectors. So, just taking that away. But it really takes that one phone call or just making a decision that's an action you want to take when, talking about these things. Because another thing about the utility, which I would like to elevate, is like it serves, it's the lifeline of society. And so everyone inside working in the organization, however it's structured, wherever it came from, like the core people in the field, doing the engineering, doing the design, operating the switches, planning the emergency response plans, coordinating that conversation across the multiple groups. I mean, that is, human connectedness and communication and change management, like all packaged in one. So you did say you moved organizations. Is the program still running, but it's running through you, or is there like
There's
effort?
still the emergency preparedness department does that. I think they're it's not stopped or anything like that, but I did the new folks on board to replace me. So, and I'm still in contact and helping them with stuff. So I'm sure I'm still going to be involved. I don't like
Right.
to, and
Right.
I like doing it. That's the other thing. If you can get someone who likes doing it and is just super passionate about safety, which I have to say, in utilities, I feel like everybody I've ever met is always passionate. It's always number one, but just the passion behind it is
Right.
amazing.
It becomes evident, as I
Yeah,
see
it
here
really
today.
does. But it is hard to go in front and talk to a group of people. So that volunteer on that is nice, but it's also a really good opportunity to get folks who aren't comfortable with public speaking and do that and work on their continuous improvement, not only continuously improving the safety of the community, continuously improving themselves, and it's really just a win-win for everybody.
I love it.
It really is, and that's the best advice is don't shy away from just dive right in and have fun. Safety can
Yes.
be fun. It is fun.
So, thinking about everything happening, like grid modernization, I mean, I think, there's an enormous amount of conversation around the energy industry right now. So, like, it's almost like ripe for the pickings because it is at the forefront, in regards to like the capacity, the build out, the infrastructure, national security for data and connection data center. So, thinking about, whoever our listeners are, a big part of, I think, the utilities mission is like, strengthening the signal, getting really strong on the importance of having full situational awareness of all assets and understanding the true optimization so that discussions, projects, programs, understandings can like stem from that. And so I'm getting to a point here. I'm going to ask you, like, it's really easy to like forget about the basics, forget about the fundamentals. So like thinking about what you go into the room and, feel are the core topics. What are like 3 lessons that you just want, and we kind of said them earlier, but you would want your students, the public, really even internal folk to like know and be aware of when out being aware of that electricity, like what it takes or how to be safe and how to approach it.
So one of the things I talk about too in the training is don't be afraid of it, but just respect it. A very important life lesson I learned, I worked in delis all my life, was don't be afraid of the slicer that slices the meat. Respect what it can do. And that's the same thing with electricity. So I'd say respect it, but don't fear it. The next thing would be wire down safety, because that's most likely what folks are going to run into, how to handle it, what to do. A lot of people think you can drive over a live wire and you'll just be just fine because you have rubber tires. I'm like, no, 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 no. So that's things, and how far away to stay from it, and who, and for younger children, who to tell, because they might not have a phone, but find a trusted adult, teacher, parent, guardian, whomever, and tell them about it. And then really just the basics of it, like it's made at a power plant. It goes through the big lines you see, the transmission lines they're called. Then it goes down to those substations that have the nice landscaping around them that look all pretty with the big towers and the bushings and all that stuff, and basic electric understanding. So you're speaking the same language. And that's something that we, in utilities, we speak almost a totally different language than the normal world of the outside of utilities. But so we can find a common ground so we both know what we're speaking about. And I think those are the main things to talk about. Really, the wire down safety is the
Right.
main.
That's the key one. I mean,
Yeah.
we should have more science about it or something. Well, also, I know, and just, this is really just a leading question for the whole. New York right now has some initiatives around battery energy storage systems on the residential distribution grid. So, from my own experience, the education understanding of those devices is novel and new, not only for the utility, but right for everyone. So, like, that's going to be a big part of educating the emergency response group. So like, the OEMs, and then taking that education into the rooms. I mean, there's just so much that we can be aware of, talking about, and conceptualizing. And I just know those batteries, right? They're a different phenomena. So like it's another layer of, making sure we understand what to do or how to approach it, and what to take if it's not operating as it seems it should. So
I'm
not to
glad
give
you
a shout out to batteries, but I know New York has a lot of them coming. So
Just to give us our own little kudos for that is the team there's one in our service territory nearby that our team ran an exercise with our local first responders on how to handle that, brought in vendors who are experts, subject matter experts on batteries and how to respond to them. We did a training class for first responders and a like a tabletop exercise to discuss how we would handle it. And that was the team who actually facilitated its install. I give them a lot of credit for that. And I was only a participant. I was a player in the exercise, but it was very useful and very appreciated. And we do our first responder training. We do talk about how to respond to batteries if it does happen, if there is an emergency there.
love it. So I think one of the general themes is just do it. Like, we know it
Yeah.
needs to be done. We have the knowledge because we're working with the technology. So get out there and start educating and informing and closing the gaps, which is a lot harder. But because you're interacting with multiple organizations and there's different hierarchies and it costs money and there's resources, but like knowing all of that, you still, have to know that to then take action to do it. So I love it. All right. So with that, any other last words for our listeners? I just want to thank you again.
Yeah, when it comes to utilities, and I know they all operate like this, I may have said it before, it's safety is the first and foremost thing we think about with everything we do, not just to our employees, but to the public as well. And it's always the most important thing. If we perform flawlessly and someone gets hurt, we have not performed flawlessly. So that's just how I feel about safety. Without
Yeah.
safety, nothing else.
Yeah, public safety initiatives like this reminds us that reliability and resilience are not just technical concepts. They truly are human ones. Education, awareness, and trust plays a critical role in really keeping our community safe. So to our listeners, I really encourage you to think about how safety education shows up in your own organizations and where there may be opportunities to engage earlier, communicate more clearly, and really partner more thoughtfully. You have to find those connections and those partnerships and then just go. So again, thank you, Jeff, for jumping on and talking about this journey and this story. I think, I'm grateful for everyone who submitted, but I'm happy that we were able to elevate this for you. And I look forward to hearing about more of what you're up to in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being on.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Grid Mod Pod. Thanks for tuning in. We hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode soon. Until then, keep powering on.